Well, children's mental health challenges amid the COVID-19 pandemic have been declared a national crisis as many public school districts across the country closed this week due to a surge of the Omicron variant. Now, for more on this, let's bring in clinical psychologist Dr. Catherine Coleman, CEO of the Freedom Foundation, Withe, and leadership coach Kenneth Allen Thomas. Good morning, you all.
Good morning.
All right, Dr. Coleman, let me start with you. Now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Withe and over 77,000 physicians are now acknowledging that children's mental health is a huge concern. And according to the CDC, 6,600 suicides with children ages 10 to 24 just in 2020. Suicide attempts and emergency room visits in adolescent girls rose by 51% during the pandemic. Have you noticed a shocking rise in urgent mental health help for kids?
Well, it's a crisis across the board, especially for adolescents and teenagers. You know, they truly have been stripped of a lot of those rites of passage with all of the pandemic and the remote learning that they've had to go through. And this has really pushed them into a place of instability where they've lost out on important things like socialization and proactive stress relievers like sports and clubs and all of this stuff that's really good for them. And the truth of the matter is that kids need stability. They need to be going to school. They need to have some routine in their life. And school is something that provides this for them. And so it's no surprise that during the pandemic with school closures that we saw a rise in mental health issues.
Well, Aaron, a January 2021 report from CDC researchers said little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission. So what do you make of school systems across the country still delaying the reopenings after winter break?
Yeah, it's completely outrageous. I've always said that a test of society is how we treat our most vulnerable. And when we start closing schools, what we're actually saying is that we care more about the perceived threat of COVID amongst adults than we do about kids' education and their mental health that goes with it. I mean, we have a variant where 99.9% of people as a whole will survive. Yeah, we're thinking it's a good idea now to shut down schools. This is the agenda of the teachers' unions being shown in full force. It's not the agenda of the teachers, though. Teachers around the country, they're heroes. Most of the ones that are calling our phones at the Freedom Foundation every day, they want to be in schools teaching. So that's why this is so difficult to comprehend, is that the views of the teachers' unions do not line up with those of the teachers.
Well, Kenneth, how can leaders and policymakers treat this mental health crisis like the emergency that it truly is?
Yeah, I think moving forward is the best option, honestly. There's a story of the 4 lepers where those 4 lepers at the time, they were stuck in an in-between place and there was an enemy that was attacking them. But if they go back to their home, then they died. If they stay where they're at, then they die. Their only choice was to actually move forward. And me being a teacher myself, teaching dance and things of that nature, from a teacher standpoint, it's really beneficial to have students that are in place. But at the same time, we have to move cautiously. We do have to be wise in every step that we make. So really, technically, I feel that number one, we need to pray as a nation, and then we have to move forward from there. How are we going to move forward where we can all collectively come together to make this process work for everyone? But we can't move in fear at the end of the day, because that's just not an option. We were made for community, not isolation.
Well, Dr. Coleman, earlier you mentioned kids socializing. So take a listen to what Dr. Withe had to say about the importance of relationships when it comes to mental health.
Our relationships in our lives, for our kids and for adults, are one of our most powerful buffers for stress, one of our most important supports, if you will, for our mental health. And encouraging our children to invest in relationships with family members, with friends, is such an important part of ensuring their mental health and well-being.
Dr. Coleman, do you agree with that building strong relationships are one of the most crucial aspects for those who may be struggling right now?
100%. Humans, by and large, are social beings, and we rely on our relationship to be that buffer between stress, to bounce things off of other people, to learn from. Relationships are truly what makes humans, different than any other mammal and any other animal. And so they are incredibly important, and it's incredibly important that we allow children and teenagers to foster these relationships as early on as possible so that they can grow into productive members of society and adults.
Well, Aaron, your wife is actually an elementary school teacher. Now, what does she notice when it comes to the mental health of her students?
Oh, it's completely dropped. My wife teaches first grade, So she has the kids that she's teaching haven't known school outside of COVID. So they struggle to even get through a full school day. At least they did at the start of this pandemic. So it's been really difficult for her to actually go and deliver the education to her children. She comes home every day. Basically, the kids are far worse off than the kids that she was teaching 2 and 3 years ago. So the detriment to the kids' education is significant. And, we should be allowing kids to be back in school full-time without any remote learning option, which a lot of schools, especially in liberal cities and states, are still on this remote learning model, or at least have had that option out there for students. And frankly, it just doesn't work. Kids need to be back in schools. They need to be interacting with their schoolmates. We don't need to be protecting teachers from a variant which 99.9% of people will survive. But frankly, like I said earlier, most teachers want to be back in the classroom. That's what we're hearing from my wife, certainly, and from teachers across the country.
Well, Kenneth, as we mentioned earlier, we're just seeing soaring rates of depression and mental illness among young children. How do you have those conversations as a parent with your child?
Yeah, well, I actually had a conversation last night with my own daughter who also has experienced this as well. And she's experienced it on a different level and everything at this point. And honestly, her feeling on it, and she's a senior in high school, her feeling on it is we have to move cautiously, have to move wisely. So if remote learning is an option for some people, let that be an option. I believe that increased testing and things in that nature are, something that we can all take into consideration to make sure that everyone is safe. But to have this conversation, I believe we have to just keep it real with our families, keep it real with our children, and let them know what is at stake at the moment. I think great leaders always lay everything out on the table so that the people that are following us know exactly which way to go, how to move. So being transparent is the best option for our children.
That's a fantastic point that we will end on right there. Well, thank you, Dr. Catherine Coleman, Aaron Withe, and Kenneth Allen Thomas. Such an important conversation. We really appreciate all of your insight.